I didn't take the job for the money. I took it because the contract for Rig Abyss 9 was only 3 pages long. Most of it was a list of things I wasn't allowed to look at. We aren't drilling for oil. We are drilling for sound. And last night, at 4,000 feet below the crust, the drill hit something that started screaming back. Rule number 4 is the only reason the crew is still sane. If you see a coworker walking on the ceiling, do not call out their name. They aren't your friend anymore. They are just a suit filled with what? The pressure gauges just hit 0, but we're still sinking. If you want to see the footage from the depth camera, subscribe and like this video. I'm about to show you what's coming up the elevator shaft. The helicopter dropped me off on the helipad of Abyss 9 at midnight. The wind was screaming, but as soon as the heavy steel doors of the airlock hissed shut, the world went dead. Not just quiet, but a heavy, pressurized silence that made my teeth ache. The foreman didn't shake my hand. He just handed me a laminated card and pointed toward the living quarters. The card wasn't an ID. It was a list of protocols. Rule 1, the vibration check. Every hour, you must place your hand against the main support pillar in the mess hall. If the steel feels warm, everything is normal. If the steel is vibrating so fast it hums, you have 10 minutes to reach the secondary oxygen room. The hum isn't the machinery. It's the sound of the pressure outside trying to find a way into your skull. I spent my first 3 hours staring at the sonar monitors. We were drilling into a geological anomaly the crew called the Silence Pocket. It was a sphere of perfect emptiness buried 4 miles beneath the seabed. The drill hit the edge of the pocket at 3 a.m. On the monitor, the drill bit didn't slow down. It accelerated. It was as if the Earth wasn't resisting anymore. It was pulling us in. Rule 2, the suit check. If you pass a crew member in the hallway and you hear the sound of water sloshing inside their boots, do not look at their feet. Keep walking and report to the infirmary for a hearing test. The abyss doesn't take your body, it just fills the empty spaces. If you acknowledge the sound, the water will realize you can hear it and it will begin to fill you too. I heard it on my way to the engine room. Slosh, slosh, slosh. It was the chief engineer. He was walking toward me, his yellow slicker dripping with a dark, oily substance that smelled like a dead reef. I kept my head down. I focused on the rivets in the wall. As he passed, the sound of the water inside him was so loud it sounded like a breaking wave. I didn't breathe until I reached the airlock. Rule 3, the camera feed. At 4 a.m., the internal security monitors will glitch. For 60 seconds, you will see a room on the rig that doesn't exist. It is a nursery. If the cradle in the nursery is rocking, turn off the monitors and count to 30. If the cradle is still, you must leave the room immediately. A still cradle means the occupant is already standing behind you. I watched the screen. The static cleared and there it was. A small wooden nursery in the middle of a steel oil rig. The cradle was carved from dark, rotted wood. It wasn't rocking. It was perfectly, deathly still. I felt the temperature in the control room drop. I felt a cold, wet hand rest gently on my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I just closed my eyes and whispered the only prayer I remembered from childhood. When I opened them, the monitor was back to the sonar feed. But the handprint on my shoulder was still there, glowing with a faint, bioluminescent blue. The blue glow from the handprint on my shoulder didn't fade. It pulse-timed itself to my heartbeat. I tried to scrub it off in the communal showers, but the water felt like needles, and the drain began to gurgle with a sound that resembled a choked laugh. I stayed in the corridors, moving toward the lower decks where the vibration was loudest. I needed to see the drill. I needed to know what the silence pocket was hiding. Rule 4, the ceiling crawler. If you enter the pump room and hear the sound of bones snapping, do not look up. A member of the crew has been integrated. They are no longer bound by gravity, only by hunger. If you feel a drop of warm, salt water hit your forehead, walk backward out of the room. Do not run. Running creates a vacuum in the air that helps them drop. I reached the pump room. The air was thick with the smell of rotted iron. Above me, the massive pipes were groaning, but beneath that sound, I heard it. A wet, snapping noise, like a dry branch being broken under a wet cloth. I felt a single heavy drop hit the bridge of my nose. It didn't smell like oil. It smelled like the deep trench. I didn't look up. I fixed my eyes on my own boots and stepped backward, one slow, agonizing inch at a time. A long, pale finger, stretched thin like taffy, descended into my field of vision, hovering just inches from my face before I finally cleared the doorway. Rule 5: the pressure leak. Abyss 9 is not sinking, but the world around it is changing. If the gauges show the exterior pressure is dropping while you are at 5,000 feet, the rig has entered the pocket. The windows in the observation deck will begin to show your own past. You will see your childhood home. You will see your loved ones standing on the seabed. Do not wave back. If you acknowledge the vision, the glass will lose its integrity. I made the mistake of looking. The observation deck was empty, the heavy reinforced glass showing nothing but the black void of the Atlantic. Then the blackness shifted. I saw my mother's kitchen. It was vivid, the smell of fresh bread fighting the smell of industrial grease. My mother was there, standing behind the glass, her hair waving in the water like seaweed. She pressed her hand against the pane, her mouth moving in a silent plea. The glass began to web with cracks. Not from the outside pressure, but from her touch. A single drop of water leaked through a hairline fracture, and the sound of the ocean began to scream through the gap. I tore my eyes away and slammed the emergency bulkheads shut. The internal sensor screamed. The depth gauge didn't say 5,000 feet anymore. It said 0. But outside the porthole, there were no stars. There was only an endless, glowing blue eye watching the rig from the dark. The siren for the lower decks didn't sound like a buzzer anymore. It sounded like a choir of voices screaming in a frequency I couldn't understand. I ran toward the escape pods, my boots splashing through 6 inches of black water that had begun to rise from the floorboards. The handprint on my shoulder was burning now, a searing blue heat that made my vision tilt. I reached the final airlock, but the keypad was dead. I had to consult the final pages of the protocol. Rule 6: the oxygen hallucination. As the rig enters the center of the silence pocket, the air will become a mixture of nitrogen and memory. You will feel a sudden, overwhelming urge to take off your breathing mask. You will believe you can breathe the water. This is the final stage of integration. If you see the water turning a brilliant, glowing gold, the abyss is inviting you in. You must bite your tongue until it bleeds. The taste of your own iron is the only thing that can anchor you to the physical world. I felt it. The suffocating weight of the mask became unbearable. The black water at my feet shifted, turning into a shimmering liquid gold that looked more like sunlight than the sea. It looked warm. It looked like home. I reached for the straps of my mask, my fingers trembling with a desperate need to drown. Then I bit down. The sharp, metallic tang of blood filled my mouth, and the gold dissolved back into the oily, freezing reality of the sinking rig. Rule 7: the emergency ascent. The escape pods are not designed to go up. They are designed to go out. To activate the launch, you must provide a sacrifice of sound. The silence pocket feeds on the absence of noise. To break its grip, you must scream into the external microphone until your lungs collapse. The sonar will use the vibration of your agony to punch a hole through the pressure. I grabbed the emergency mic. I looked at the monitor. The giant eye outside the rig was closing, the massive lids of skin and scale coming together to swallow Abyss 9 whole. I opened my mouth and screamed. I screamed for the mother I saw in the window. I screamed for the crew members walking on the ceiling. I screamed until I felt my vocal cords tear. The pod jolted. A violent explosion of white light blinded me as the thrusters engaged, tearing the small metal sphere away from the rig just as the giant eye snapped shut. The pressure change was so intense I blacked out. I woke up on the surface. The sun was blinding and the ocean was as flat as a mirror. There was no sign of Abyss 9. No oil slick. No debris. I was picked up by a passing freighter 3 hours later. They asked me where I came from. I told them I worked for the Department of Energy on a deep-sea research platform. They looked at me like I was insane. They told me there hasn't been a rig at those coordinates in 30 years. I don't tell them about the handprint on my shoulder. I don't tell them that when I close my eyes I can still see the gold. But last night I went to take a drink of water from a glass on my nightstand. As the water touched my lips, I heard a voice. It wasn't my mother. It was the chief engineer. Rule number 8. The water whispered. The keeper never leaves the abyss. He just carries the abyss back to the surface. I looked into the glass. My reflection didn't have eyes. It just had two glowing, bioluminescent blue circles, waiting for me to come home.